Welcome, dear listeners. Imagine strolling along a quiet shoreline, the early morning mist hanging in the air, when suddenly you come across something so strange, so otherworldly, that it stops you in your tracks. What would you do? Today, we unravel the mystery of an unusual discovery, a tale of curiosity, science, and the unexpected twist that left even the experts in awe. Stay with me as we dive into this extraordinary journey. Scientists worldwide remain astounded by this revelation. A frequent beachgoer, a local woman, came across the peculiar substance while walking along the shoreline on a damp morning. The woman promptly reached out to scientists and local authorities upon making this peculiar discovery, leaving them all utterly amazed. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't. And hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Natalie squinted her eyes, attempting to discern the distant object. The radiant sun's reflection created a mesmerizing shimmer on its surface. Oddly, as she drew nearer, the dazzling appearance did little to aid in its identification. Upon standing right beside it, all she could discern was a sizable puddle of colorful goo. Nonetheless, it held a certain allure for her. Natalie couldn't resist the temptation and crouched down, her finger poised to touch the enigmatic substance. However, the goo sent a jolt of fear through her as it suddenly began pulsating vigorously, shifting in size. It bore a resemblance to a jellyfish, albeit one of the most peculiar she had ever encountered. Fortunately, Natalie had someone on speed dial for situations like this. Her friend Ben, a dedicated nature enthusiast and frequent companion on her beach walks, was always just a call away. Natalie's initial step was to capture a photograph of the peculiar pulsating goo and send it to Ben, ensuring he had a visual reference for their conversation. Without delay, she dialed Ben's number, eager to discuss the image. "So, what's the story with this thing, buddy?" she inquired. A short while later, Natalie's phone rang once more. However, this time it was not the familiar voice of her friend on the other end of the line. Instead, she heard the voice of Jim Parsons, a renowned bioexpert who specialized in ocean biodiversity. Doctor. Parsons informed Natalie that he had received both the call and the picture from his colleague Ben, who held a minor administrative position at the laboratory where Jim conducted his research. Their acquaintance stemmed from this professional connection. Jim expressed genuine interest in the image and requested permission to visit in person. Naturally, Natalie consented to the visit. After a brief period of anticipation on the beach, she spotted Dr. Parsons' Jeep arriving. The scientist approached the goo and conducted a meticulous examination. However, his expression grew increasingly perplexed as he worked. "I apologize, madam, but this isn't a jellyfish at all," he declared. "If it's not a jellyfish, then what could it possibly be?" Natalie inquired of the scientist. Regrettably, the befuddled Jim Parsons couldn't provide an answer. It was an entity unlike anything he had encountered before. Recognizing the importance of solving this mystery, the scientist proposed the idea of transporting the goo to his laboratory for more extensive examination. Working together, they carefully lifted the goo off the sandy beach using a shovel. They struggled to hoist the goo off the ground as it was surprisingly heavy, weighing at least 80 pounds. However, as they attempted to place it into a container, the goo began to react vigorously. With the goo safely attached to the car using ropes, it was time to transport it to the scientist's laboratory. Natalie inquired if she could accompany them, and the scientist couldn't think of any reason to refuse. After a brief drive, they arrived at the laboratory where Dr. Parsons conducted his research. The lab was brimming with state-of-the-art equipment, but on this day, they would only require one specific tool. The scientist retreated a few steps, sinking into a chair positioned against the wall. For a moment, he simply gazed into the empty space ahead of him. Natalie had never witnessed such a swift shift in someone's demeanor, from excitement to a sense of apprehension. Dr. Parsons' reaction sent shivers down Natalie's spine, leaving her feeling uneasy. Clearly, something deeply unsettling was unfolding under the microscope, prompting Natalie to inquire about what Dr. Parsons had observed. However, her questions went unanswered as the scientist remained silent. Instead, he gazed around the room and covered his mouth with his hands. Finally, he broke his silence with a stunned expression, muttering, "I can't believe it." Jim rose from his chair and approached Natalie, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. He extended an invitation for her to view the perplexing discovery under the microscope. He assured her that he would elucidate the enigmatic findings, recognizing that the intricacies might be challenging for someone lacking expertise in the field. Parsons explained that the slow-moving elements under the lens indeed resembled those of a jellyfish, confirming Natalie's initial guess. When she inquired about the fast-moving components, he replied, "The fast-moving parts are something entirely different." His perplexed expression remained as he tried to fathom the implications of their discovery. Natalie was eager to understand what these fast-moving components could be, if not jellyfish. However, the scientist appeared equally perplexed. He admitted to having no answers, as the cells had fused seamlessly with those of the jellyfish. Typically, animal cells would exhibit more subdued movements, which added to the enigma of the situation. Dr. Parsons was insistent, stating, "But these cells move and appear unlike anything I've ever seen." He peered at the sample under his microscope repeatedly, growing increasingly puzzled with each examination. "We must unravel this mystery. We need to discover the truth," Parsons affirmed. That's when Natalie took the initiative. She proposed that their best course of action would be to return to the beach where they had found the organism. Perhaps there were some clues hidden there that could aid in their investigation. As it turned out, this decision would prove to be the wisest move they could make. They approached the water's edge, and both of them pointed in the same direction. "How did I miss this before?" Natalie wondered aloud. Along the water's edge, there were dark streaks stretching out into the ocean. They couldn't discern their origin, but they were determined to find out. They both suspected that these streaks had something to do with what they had observed in the lab, so they chartered a boat to follow the streaks further into the ocean. They inquired with the boat owner if he had ever seen these streaks before, and he admitted that he had. However, he couldn't provide them with an explanation either. The streaks extended quite a distance, guiding them beyond a substantial rock formation in the water, obstructing their view of the beach. However, as they sailed past it, they could discern a small speck on the horizon. They continued in the correct direction, and the speck gradually enlarged as they approached it. After an hour on the boat, they were finally able to discern the nature of the speck. Far from the shoreline and deep in the ocean, a massive oil rig loomed. It appeared to be emitting a dark, noxious substance from the ocean floor. The jellyfish varied in size, but they all shared a common and unusual color pattern reminiscent of the beach jellyfish. It was evident that their appearance was linked to the oil rig. Determined to uncover the truth, the intrepid duo resolved to ascend the oil rig and confront the operations manager. Despite entering his office with confidence, they emerged with a grim realization. The manager displayed a complete lack of concern for the oil leakage's impact on the ecosystem. Disheartened by their meeting, Natalie and Jim were sent away with no progress. However, their determination remained unwavering. Jim collected a sample from the contaminated water around the oil rig and returned to his lab for analysis. He meticulously examined it and, most importantly, compared it to the jellyfish sample he had gathered with Natalie. What he discovered left him utterly astounded. The samples were not just a mere match. They revealed something beyond belief. Jim presented both samples to Natalie and proceeded to elucidate his discoveries. He inquired, "Do you observe the fast-moving cells in both samples?" Natalie nodded, acknowledging that they appeared identical. Jim continued, "That's because they are identical. The jellyfish appeared to have undergone cellular-level mutations by absorbing the oil. However, as his initial excitement waned, A different emotion began to surface: anger. Pausing for a moment to contemplate the oil rig's role in forcing the jellyfish to mutate, he felt his heart ache. Humans had rendered these waters inhospitable for years, and the callous indifference of the oil rig manager deeply disturbed him. Jim glanced at Natalie, sensing that she shared his sentiments. They both realized that they needed to put an end to the pollution caused by the oil rig, no matter what it took. "I know the manager was uncooperative," Jim replied, "but we can't let that deter us. We need to gather evidence, rally public support, and make this issue impossible for them to ignore." Jim offered a reassuring smile and placed his hand on Natalie's shoulder. "Don't worry, Natalie, I've got this," he assured her. Natalie was intrigued but also puzzled as she watched Jim retrieve his phone from his pocket and begin dialing a number. "We need a plan, and I know just the person to call," he said with determination. As they waited for the call to connect, Jim explained to Natalie that he had a close friend working in local government who shared his deep love for nature. This friend had influential connections that could potentially lead to the swift closure of the oil rig. "Hello, David," Jim greeted his friend over the phone. He went on to provide a detailed account of their discoveries on the beach, emphasizing the remarkable mutation they had observed. However, he placed particular emphasis on the environmental damage caused by the oil rig. By the end of the call, Jim's government friend had pledged his support and assistance in addressing the situation. Jim ended the call with a wide smile, filled with hope and enthusiasm. However, Natalie couldn't share his level of excitement. She was unfamiliar with this David person and uncertain about what he could actually do to help. Jim reassured Natalie, explaining that his friend David had a reputation for employing unconventional methods to solve problems, and they should have faith in his abilities. Natalie received a phone call from an unfamiliar number about a week later. She usually knew everyone who called her, but when she answered the call, she was pleasantly surprised to hear Jim's voice on the other end. His first words were, "Natalie, it's done." Natalie felt a wave of confusion wash over her. She had been in the dark about Jim's government friend's plan, so she had no idea how they had managed to address the oil spill issue. She pressed Jim for more details, but his response was cryptic. Natalie, driven by curiosity and anticipation, climbed into her car and made her way to the sandy shore. As she stepped out of her vehicle, the scene that unfolded before her eyes left her in awe. She couldn't help but break into a delighted smile. In the distance, she beheld the massive oil rig being towed away by a powerful ship. It was a symbolic departure, a vessel ready to engage in commerce elsewhere. This sight filled her with assurance that these once polluted waters would soon regain their purity. With a sense of accomplishment, Natalie shifted her attention back to the beach. She noticed her scientist companion Jim approaching with another man, presumably his government ally. The government associate cordially shook Natalie's hand and asserted that he would elucidate everything. He initiated the conversation by emphasizing the pivotal role played by the jellyfish. They brought out the container that held it and transported the creature to the headquarters of the board of directors who owned the oil company. Upon arrival, they boldly entered and presented the container along with all the collected data on the table. The evidence of their pollution was irrefutable. They made it clear that the ball was in their court. If the oil company didn't cease its activities in this ocean area, all the gathered information would be exposed to the public. The concrete data was compelling, but it was the eerie jellyfish itself that had the most profound impact, leaving the board members visibly shaken. The board promptly ceased their operations, and Natalie, Jim, and his friend watched with satisfaction as they witnessed the departure of the polluting company. The sight of the massive vessel sailing away filled Natalie with immense joy. Their plan had been successful, and she felt that by taking action, they had contributed to making the world a little cleaner and safer. Jim hurried to his truck, knowing that there was one final task to complete. Returning with the large container in hand, he wore a contented smile. "It's time to release this creature," he declared. They waded into the water, tilting the container on its side. It took a few moments, but the jellyfish gradually resumed its movement, initially slow, and soon darted off into the expanse of the salty ocean before them. It was a mesmerizing sight, and they couldn't help but wonder about the possibility of discovering new species, hopefully driven by curiosity rather than necessity in the future.